Hello, everyone. Welcome for joining us today. We are going to be talking about all things career assessments. We are joined by Dan and Beth Greenwood from Greenwood Associates and Samantha Feynman, who right now says my name on her profile. I'm Casey Schmaliker, where Sam and I are both from New Frontiers. I always start off with a couple of logistical stuff before we jump right into the conversation. So Dan and Beth do come from and provide, their organization provides career assessments. So we do want to try and just avoid like, what's the best career assessment? We don't mean for this to be a solicitous webinar. We really just want to try and talk about what career assessments are and how to use them best, what they can be used for. And a couple of other logistical stuff. Please submit questions throughout. If you weren't able to email any questions before, there's a questions dialog box, and we would much rather talk about the things that you guys find you have questions on than things that we think or assume you may have questions on. So any questions you submit, we will get to. I'm launching a quick poll right now just to see the makeup of the audience. If you could just complete that poll, that way we know who's in the audience so we can tailor some of those answers to it. That will be very, very helpful. And then, of course, there is a follow-up survey. So if there's any questions that you don't want to ask here, you can put them into the follow-up survey. That will be very helpful as well. Okay, so we have 89% of people have voted, 79%, and again, I always say this, the percentages don't add up to 100, but 79% of the people in the audience are professionals, 20% are parents of high school students, and 24% are parents of beyond high school, so whether that be college or maybe not the college track. So let me close that. And so to jump right in, Dan and Beth, just there's sometimes a common misnomer or misunderstanding of what career assessments are. Like trying to make things easy of just like, give me jobs to apply to. But if you could just explain a bit more of like what a comprehensive career assessment displays beyond just the listing of the jobs, because I know that's what a lot of people gravitate towards at first, but what else can you gain from career assessments?
Well, I think that what we need to do is take into account that there are many types of career assessments, and there are many ways to go about looking for careers. And research shows us that there are 4 domains that are most important when thinking about careers. There's your abilities, what are you good at? There's your interest, what are you interested in doing? There's your personality, who are you as a person? And then there's abilities, interests, and values. The most important one, thank you. Values. And those all need to be taken into account because that's going to make you happy in your career life. If your values are the same as those that are in your career, if your personality matches others that are in your career, if your abilities are a good fit with what you're going to be asked to do on a daily basis, and if it's something you're interested in. We know from Dr. Duckworth's work in Grit that interest is very important because interests turn into passions, and hopefully passions turn into purpose. And we know that people who are successful are operating with a sense of purpose. So there's all 4 of these types of things that need to be taken into account. And some assessments will be an abilities test, and they'll say, boy, you're really good at math. You should be a statistician or an accountant. There are others that are interest inventories. Oh, you really like working in the garden. You should be a gardener or a landscape architect. Then there are the personality, the Myers-Briggs. Oh, you're an INFJ. That means, people frequently who are that like to do these types of jobs. So you've got these different assessments which are evaluating different aspects of those 4 domains. Now, the best type of assessment will take all of those 4 domains into account. That's the ideal, more holistic approach to career counseling. And then the other thing I
was going to say, the other thing that comes along with that is, like you say, Casey, everybody wants to look at that list of jobs, but without going through some form of self-exploration where you're talking to a counselor and thinking about who you are and why those values are important to you, then you understand why you match with those jobs, and you also understand which of those jobs would be better for you.
Yeah.
So what you were going to say?
That's exactly what I was going to say. There's the assessment, and then there's the process of going through that assessment,
which we call the self-exploration process. And then there's a career exploration process.
And then once those jobs are narrowed to a finite few, then you build an action plan. So that's a long-winded answer to a very short question.
But it's great because it really does bring up like that self-exploration part is so paramount to the whole process. And too often we jump to applying to jobs or choosing career majors in college before we really know ourselves. And that without that precursor makes things difficult. And so Sam, I know like this is why we love working with Dan and Beth as well. So many things line up. We use something called our VISAS process, which is values, interests, skills, and abilities. It's very lined up, just a different way of looking at things. But one of the questions that came in right from the get-go, Sam, is are abilities and skills the same? Like what's that understanding of the difference between a skill versus an ability? Like a skill might be knowing how to use Excel, but an ability might be being good with numbers. Like, what's that difference between those two?
It's a good question. I think it's sometimes it's a little bit of a play on semantics, and it's sometimes like based on who you talk to. But I think just generally speaking, I would say that abilities are your qualities of your ability to be able to do something. And skills are the actual behaviors of doing something. So a lot of times you have the capacity to do something, and those are your abilities. And then the skills that you learn while to do things are the skills that you're working on. So you use your abilities to develop skills, if that makes any sense. Your abilities are kind of like your foundation. And then through training and learned behavior and modeling and practicing, you develop skills. So sometimes I think we see that individuals have ability, right? Or they have a capacity, but they don't necessarily have the skills associated with being able to demonstrate their true abilities.
It's the example I use, like Excel versus being good with numbers. Being able to do Excel is something you'd put on your resume. You're not going to put on your resume, I'm good with numbers. And so just to go back, Dan and Beth, yep.
It's also a good example, Casey, in that so your ability to maybe use a computer, right, or your abilities to be able to work with numbers very easily, but you need to learn the skills of using a specific type of computer program, right, that encapsulates your abilities. But that's a perfect example of showing the difference. Sorry.
It's okay. So just to go back, Dan, you mentioned the 4 different domains. So like the 4 types of assessments. One in the audience just wanted to hear them again, if you could list them again.
Sure. So there's abilities, there's interest, there's values, and there's personality. Those are the 4 different domains that are important in career assessments.
And so that actually is a perfect segue. So what are things like you guys designed, researched, were a part of a team to create a comprehensive career assessment? What are things people should be looking for? And those 4 domains are a good starting area, but when people are looking at career assessments, what makes a good one? And you can promote a little bit because you designed one that's good. So what are things that people can look for? Because I know a lot of people, it's high school, take this career assessment, and it's like, is that good? Is that enough? So what would you say are things that either professionals, parents, or individuals can look for when looking for a good career assessment?
So what most career professionals do is they use a battery. So if you go to a career counselor, they're probably not just going to give you one assessment. They're going to give you a series of assessments and maybe do a value sort, a card sort. So that's the difficulty with that is you take the Myers-Briggs and it gives you a list of jobs. And then you take the strong interest inventory and it gives you a list of jobs. Then you do a value sort and you come up with some other ideas. And then you maybe do some abilities testing and it'll give you yet another set of careers. And what a career counselor will have to do then is synthesize all of those lists into one list. The beauty of the assessment that we created is we give a battery of exams in our assessment, but it takes all of that information into account in the algorithm to come up with the career matches. And ours comes up with your top 100 careers out of a database of over 1,000. So that's another aspect of the assessments. How many careers are they choosing from?
There are some assessments that have, a set amount, maybe 150 careers, and they just cycle through those. You will get all 150 careers on your list, but the ones that are the best matches are at the top.
Whereas we are more specific in the actual career titles. So it's not just psychologist, it's clinical psychologist, it's neuropsychologist, IO psychologist, counseling psychologist, school psychologist. So and that, when you're doing the career exploration, helps the client become more familiar with the nuances of the different careers, rather than just, you should study psychology and be a psychologist. You can start thinking about, do I want to work in the business world as an IO psychologist, or do I want to work in schools as a school psychologist? Do I want to work in counseling or mental health or addiction? So it just is a more nuanced way to do that. But you should take into account a series. Now, so that's the actual assessment. And then I'll just go back to what Beth says. It really helps when a counselor sits down with you and then has you prioritize those things that you say are important, and really distill an identity. So ideally, you want to, the first oracle of Delphi, know thyself. If you know thyself, then you're able to make better decisions about what's going to make you happy. So you can't skip that self-exploration phase.
If you want to help people, but your top one, your number one priority, your number one personal value or career value is having time for family, basically you're saying, I want a good work-life balance. And doctors help people, but they don't necessarily have a good work-life balance, whereas teachers do. So knowing that about, it's not good or bad to want to have time with your family, but if that's what's most important to you, then let's look at those jobs that you match with that are all helping people and make sure that you are picking one that gives you that good work-life balance.
And so Sam, with like one of the things to distill what Dan and Beth just shared, it's concrete. Like good career assessments are not vague. And so as a coach, someone coaching people towards goals, how important is that piece of having something concrete as opposed to having an abstract idea like you want to be a psychologist? How does that help as a professional, or if a parent is supporting a kid, why is that concrete aspect so important from career assessments?
I think that that self-exploration piece, because it's a very abstract process that a person may or may not do naturally. And so when we're not necessarily, reflecting on what we're good at, what we value, where our personality would fit in, I think, many times we'll think that something's a good fit, but the reality of it might not be, right? What our concept of it is, which is very abstract, may be very different than the reality. So whatever we can do to make those concepts more concrete, I think is really important. And so, to get the buy-in and the commitment of yourself through an exploration process is really, really important. And then again, this is all stuff that's very abstract that we don't necessarily do thoroughly enough before we make big decisions in our lives. And so, one of the things I think about making it concrete is it gives us time to evaluate and practice different roads, so that when we have to make longer term decisions, we're doing it with more confidence. So one of the things I remember is when we worked with a student one time, Casey, he was your student, and he wanted to go into the world of finance. And so that was a very abstract concept to him, right? Just like Dan and Beth were saying, like there's so many different things that finance could encapsulate that concept of being in finance. And we really had to kind of narrow it down to what were his strengths and his abilities, and then kind of work that into finance positions that made sense for him, that weren't going to be overwhelming. So the more concrete you can make it, I think the more successful you'll see that you can make the right decisions for yourself for these, thinking about a career is a long-term decision. These aren't short-term decisions. So we want to put a lot of time and attention into, what we're going to do to develop that trajectory for ourselves.
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because I love talking about that student, who I will say has a career now, and it's somewhat related to finance, but it's not finance. But what I think, just to kind of just share my positive experience as a coach using the assessment, it wasn't someone else telling him what he wanted to be. His first match was what his father does. And he was like, oh, I knew that would come up. But what was great about that is he was able to see that concretely of, yes, my skills might say I'd be great at that, but I really don't want to do it. And so it's not always that the number one match should be exactly what you're going to be, but it made it very concrete for this individual to say, I see it's my number one, and I don't want to do that. So like one thing that I think, just from my personal experience, it's not always about getting affirmations of what the report says is right. It's giving the confidence to the individual to come up with an answer. No, I don't want to do that. Rather than that vague, maybe something in finance. When it was more concrete, he was able to very clearly say, I don't want to pursue that. So we went to the number 2 or the number 3. But now it wasn't that it was staying, like I heard from a sales training once, a no is better than a maybe. Career assessments can help remove those maybes, those unknowns that leave you non-committal, those people that never want to say, oh, I want to major in this, let me leave it open. Like that type of vagueness can come from the abstract, and by making things more concrete, it was a major positive experience for me. And so that perfectly led into another question. So Dan and Beth, when do you recommend considering career assessments? So like sometimes some school districts will do it in high school, sometimes they don't. Sometimes colleges offer some if you want it. Sometimes they require a course and they kind of do it. When do you recommend is a good time to at least start considering career assessments? Because many people think, oh, a career, that's far off. But when do you recommend?
We usually recommend after the age of 15 and above. Their values are solidified
to a degree, to a large degree.
Right. We highly recommend in middle school exploring. what?
Exposure.
Yeah, exposure and explore everything. Expose yourself to many things. But then starting that sophomore year, if you start with a sophomore, they have the ability throughout the rest of their high school career to get an internship, to volunteer, to shadow, and maybe they shadow somewhere and really don't like it. So then they have the opportunity to try that somewhere else. You know, we've had people say, I want to be a lawyer, and they've clerked in a law office for the summer, and they're like, no way would I ever want to work as a lawyer. So it's like you say, it's a maybe turns into a yes or a no. But we highly recommend in high school because it really helps them think about what they want to do, and then it helps them make a better choice for where they are going to go to college. And like Dan said, they have a passion about something and they're hoping to turn that into a purpose. They can show the colleges they're applying to that they've done internships or volunteered or maybe had a entry-level position in their field of interest. We work with a lot of college students that have gone to college without college counseling that have no idea what to major in. And then, of course, we work with a lot of students leaving college who are trying to figure out, they've chosen a major, finance, where are they going to go? How are they going to use it? And beyond.
Yeah, all the way up to people who are interested in a second career or career switching.
Or a retiree deciding what they want to do once they retire.
Be re-engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at different times, it serves different purposes, but in all cases, you're trying to create that end goal in mind and then making decisions in reverse. So, you know, one of Covey's habits of famous or of successful people is planning with the end in mind. So it's better when you have a goal than those other decisions, what to do in the summer, what to write a research paper on, what to intern in college, what courses to take, what to major in. All those things become easier if there's a little more direction and focus.
I felt like you were describing me, Beth, when you were talking. I went to college as an electrical engineer just because I was good at science.
Mm-hmm.
And then I changed majors to economics and government and law because I enjoyed it. It was an interest of mine. And I finally ended up in this sphere of education because guess what? I was tutoring when I was 15 years old because I was passionate about it and I was good at it. And it tied it all together. But it took me all of these iterations of trying things, seeing it out to get me to that place. And I love the description that you guys have. It's a journey. It's not a yes or no answer. But Sam, to toss this back to you, how important, like, I'm sure my mom watched me going to school to be an electrical engineer and was sitting back being like, he's never going to do this. But how important was it for me to go through that process, for the individual to be asked those questions instead of imposed on them? Like, what does that do for that accountability and ownership, like Dan and Beth just said, of like that end goal? How important is it for the individual to feel like it's their end goal, not someone else's?
Well, it goes back to that buy-in piece, right? And it goes back to the sense of purpose, right? A sense of purpose is very personal. That's not something, you know, I'm not going to do things because other people want me to do them. I'm going to do things because it's going to make me feel good. So you know, that whole part of you know, self-exploration and figuring out what you're good at versus what you're not good at, you know, that's what helps you to decide what you want to commit to, what your sense of purpose is going to be. Then it becomes your motivation. I think parents get a little nervous sometimes, right? When their children are out there kind of like trying different things, and one day they want to be a photographer, and the next day they want to be a Spanish tutor, and the next day they want to be an audiologist, and the next day they want to be a special education teacher. Not talking about anybody particular, but some people go through those different trajectories, right? So, but but like Dan and Beth said before, it's all part of the process. It's just as important to figure out what you don't want to do. You know, you may be very good at accounting, but being an accountant is not being good at accounting. It's, there's areas of expertise, your skills and your abilities, but then there's a whole nother layer of what it means to go and do that as a job every day. And so, I think it's a very personal process that we as parents should be patient with and provide guidance through, but also allow our children to explore and understand that it's okay to explore it. It's okay to go to college thinking you want to study, engineering, and then end, with a political science degree, and then go into, running a business that does tutoring and coaching. So like these are natural progressions, and we have to be patient with it and help our children reflect on what they're learning through the process, and let them go through that process and support them as they're going through it.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the guess and check model is one that I think is problematic.
It's expensive.
It's expensive.
It's expensive because they go to school and you have 2 years of engineering under your belt, and then you decide you want to be a teacher, and there's another year of college expense added to it. Possibly you need to transfer to another school, which is very disruptive. And because so many students are picking colleges for maybe reasons other than that it's a good fit for what they want to do, there are a lot of college students failing out of school and not seeing their purpose, why they should be there. They don't take responsibility. They're not passionate about going to the classes because they're not sure why they're doing it. So I guess our feeling is, even though we are huge proponents of the liberal arts education, because we do love that idea that they're exploring all sorts of things, if you have a direction, you're more likely to stay on that path.
And the other thing about career counseling is it's not as though at the end of the process they're locked in and in those three things. It's really just the beginning of them learning more about those three things. It's just providing focus. And so, part of the action plan that we always develop, the skeletal model of an action plan is, first, go talk to somebody who does those jobs. Go talk to those people. That's going to be your best source of information, what we call informational interviews. Sit down with them for 20, 30 minutes, ask them what it takes, what it's like, what do they like, what don't they like, and hopefully it's within their place of employment. So they can go in and see what it's like to work there. They can see how they dress, how many people are around, how they interact, and get all that other information about that career, because that's going to be a big decision. They're entering a career field, and it's going to be 40 years, 50 years of their life invested in this career. And so they need to learn more about it by talking to people. They need to start thinking about taking some classes and getting training, and you want them to have experience. And what we know is true is kids who have internships in college that are a good match with what they want to do are more likely to get jobs coming out of college because they've already had that experience. They already have something on their resume, as opposed to the kid who figured out late in their college career that this is what they want to do, and now they're graduating with no prior experience. And they're going head to head with a kid who was a little more focused, has a little more experience, has more to talk about, has experience with an organization that's more likely to hire them because they've already worked for them. So, the action plan really is not about them executing plan alpha and just getting to the end. It's okay, now we need to go explore more. We need to go look, and we need to learn more. And as they're exploring, it will have one of two effects. It'll either confirm, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do, and they'll get more excited about it and they'll get invested in it, hopefully building that passion. Or the example that Beth used earlier, the kid who clerks at the law office and goes, whew, that is not what Perry Mason does, and that's what I thought I wanted to do, to use a very old reference.
They went over my head. What were you going to say, Beth?
I was just going to say I worked with a recent college-bound student, and we came up with helping people, but she wasn't sure if that was in psychiatry, sociology, education, teaching. So she took Psych 101, she took Sociology 101, and she narrowed it down and has become a foreign language teacher. But that's where Dan's saying that she didn't walk away from me saying, I'm going to be a middle school art teacher or something.
Mm.
So the journey takes time, and so that there's one aspect of, you can only get so many internships a summer to get the experience. Like you can't have 5 internships that, like, there might be some programs out there, it's like do a week here, do a week here, do a week here, but that's not common. You only have so many summers until you graduate for college. But on the other end, Sam, other than just the time of when you can have the experiences, why is it important to start these conversations, like in terms of metacognition and like answering the question of what do you want to be and why? Why is that not something that is ever easy to answer the first time? Why does that take time for individuals to think in that different way about themselves? And just one other piece I'll say is, like, think about a high school student. They have very little choice in the classes they take. Like, they do this, they move to the next one, they move to the next one, they move to the next one. So why is this important to start some of these conversations sooner for the individuals to start thinking that way?
Well, I think like Dan and Beth said, this is a long-term goal. So if we look from an executive functioning perspective, what you're going to do, the focus in your career is a long-term goal. And there are a lot of short-term benchmarks that have to happen in order to achieve that long-term goal. And so if we don't want to wait until our 4th year of college to think about what we want to do for a living, right? We want to give ourselves time to explore, to figure out what we like, figure out what we don't like, figure out what we're good at, figure out what feels right, figure out what motivates us to get out of bed every day, to get the experience, to get the education, to get the knowledge, to get the training in order to eventually achieve that long-term goal. And so from a goal perspective, right, it takes a long time. From a self-reflection piece, it helps you to learn about yourself and learn about what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So this is just a long process that takes time, and the sooner that you attend to it, the more time you'll have to develop those skills and areas of expertise, but also the soft skills that are necessary in order for you to be successful in whatever that trajectory looks like for you. And so I think it's just really important to give yourselves as much time as possible. And the more you have these conversations, the more comfortable it gets and the more that you learn about yourself.
And so, like, I'll talk about that same student who's not a student anymore. He's a professional, but I did this with him about halfway through his college career. It's when I got the buy-in from him. He was interested. I wasn't forcing it on him. But in the Myers-Briggs section, he was a shy kid, but it came out that he thrives in extroversion. And I was able to connect that it's not just about careers, it's where these individuals thrive in general. And it made something, he was diagnosed on the spectrum, and it made something concrete that was so abstract for him. Why did he do better in the classes when he liked his professors and talked with them than in the classes that he didn't talk with them? So he identified as shy, but he saw that he succeeded in extroversion. And it became very easy for me to say, let's practice on those skills to get over being shy. It was no longer an attack on him. And it gave him time to practice that. So now he's in a career. He had 2 years of practicing in college. And now he's like good friends and has 3 mentors in his current job. And he's thriving, as opposed to doing the career assessment right before he applied and he had no time to practice those skills to thrive. And so that's just, so I get, if you can't tell, I get excited about some of this stuff because I really do believe career assessments are so much more than just the jobs. That exploration and discovery piece is so important. But Dan and Beth, I'm talking about college and stuff. Where does this fit in? A question came from the audience of, are career assessments helpful for a college freshman who does not know what they are interested in? And so like I think about, this is by no means to disparage communication majors, but I know a lot of people choose communications because they don't know what else to choose. Like it's just the one they fall into without knowing what communications is. So how is this helpful with thinking about majors, thinking about what you want to choose? Because I know so often it's people say, well, you're so good at this, why don't you major in this? Why is a career assessment more helpful when helping people figure out what they want?
So I guess I would say that the process of the career counseling would be wonderfully instructive because it provides a framework for college kids who think they're not interested in anything, but they are. They have interests. They just don't have a way to formalize them. And it takes rank ordering and it takes several passes. So with our assessment, we do a values assessment. We give them a set of career values and we say sort these into 4 categories: essential, very important, desirable, and not important. So right away they separate them into 4 different categories. Then the second time around we come and we say, now you said that these were essential, these 5. What did you mean by that? And so then they talk about each one. Now we say, okay, now which one of those is number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5? So it's this kind of multiple passes, talking about it, thinking about it, then rank ordering that kind of structure allows them to really begin to dial into that self-exploration, that recognition of, this is my identity, this is my brand, this is what I'm interested in, this is how I want to live my life. We also have questionnaires, a lifestyle questionnaire. Do you want to live in the city or in the country? Do you want to be sophisticated? Do you want to be rural? Do you want to drive fancy cars and have vacations? And then in work, do you want to go to work in a big building, in an office, or outside, or on the road? So you're prompting them, you're getting them to think about these different aspects of life. And sometimes they're like, well, I don't really care. That doesn't, but what you're looking for is consistency of theme and repeating themes. And those are the things that you key in on. And it's not always that they want to work in a big building or a small building. They may not care, but it may be important that you just keep hearing over and over that wanting to help people, or I want to build things, or I want to make a lot of money and be powerful and prestigious and wealthy. You find out through asking them many different ways what's most important, and you're constantly asking them to rank order those priorities. And you're also asking them questions about what do they like to do, and what are they good at, and what would they change about themselves if they could. If they had 3 wishes, what would they be? So it's a lot of this self-reflection, answering questions about themselves, asking them to prioritize, order them, so that they, at the end, you come up with a mission statement. We call them purpose and passion statements. But basically, my purpose and my passions are these things in this order. And once you get to that level of specificity, the jobs then make a lot more sense. It's easier to differentiate the jobs because some of them are going to fit that mission statement better than others.
And for all the questions we ask, the one question we never ask is, what do you want to be when you grow up? We help them discover what they want to be, as opposed to saying, what do you want to be? Right.
Or telling them, oh gosh, I see that you got a really high score on your AP calculus. That means you're good at math. You should do X, Y, and Z.
And the other thing we always do, let's say they come up with 100 jobs and they always thought they wanted to be a lawyer and lawyer's not on there. We add lawyer to their list and we say, let's go explore what a lawyer does and what law school is like. And, because lots of times kids come to us with these preconceived ideas that they want to do what their parents are doing, or that they absolutely don't want to do what their parents are doing, or their parents have the perfect job picked out for them.
And I would just throw in, again, personal experience, that synthesis piece that Dan and Beth were just describing, like the purpose, value statements, that type of stuff. Any assessment or any counselor should emphasize that piece. Again, like I know anytime I've done with someone, they jump to look at the jobs, but that part becomes a cheat sheet for writing cover letters and practicing for interviews, because so many kids young adults struggle talking about themselves, what they value. And by writing this out, I literally have them pull that out every time they write a cover letter. And now they're more comfortable talking about themselves. They have more practice. Think about if you've never talked about yourself and your strengths and what you value, getting thrown into an interview and being forced to do it without ever having asked it before. And so it really is so helpful.
Many times it's the first question in an interview, tell me about yourself. And they don't want to hear, well, I was born, and I lived, and that's not what they asked.
And by taking this holistic approach that our system takes, we're able to uncover lots of other aspects about them. For example, would they prefer to work behind the scenes on a team, or do they want to be the one out there getting all of the recognition? And again, it's neither good nor bad, but I'd rather work behind the scenes in a team. Don't put me out front there. It makes me very uncomfortable. And we have jobs for both. These aspects are important to many different careers. So we help them uncover a lot of things like that. Would they prefer structure or non-structure? Do they like to take risks? Or are they more risk averse?
So Sam, I want to jump over. I know before we had met Dan and Beth, and also just in the beginning of New Frontiers, we were using the strong interest inventory. And so again, is this about, I always think of, I think it's the Winnie the Pooh quote, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey in getting there. So is that end result always what the goal of these are? So the question is the strong interest inventory useful with a currently academically indifferent 11th grade student with mild ADD symptoms and anxiety? There's two areas he's passionate about and excels in: soccer and video games. So just with what I said at first, would you recommend to this professional to use the strong interest inventory? And what would they really be hoping to gain from that? Should they be hoping oh, they're going to leave after that and know what they're going to be for their career? Or what would the goal of using that as a tool really be?
And it's more about the process, I think, than the product. So, I think Dan and Beth described it really, really perfectly before when they said, that career counseling, it's providing a level of focus that otherwise may not be there. And maybe, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I would be good at. It just starts to provide a certain structure and level of focus to start the exploration process. So whatever you use, it should focus around providing some guidance to further explore and then evaluate whether or not these may be good fits for long-term commitments. And so I think the strong interest inventory will give you some information, but it's what you do with that information. It's how you help or the individual themselves use that information to structure some opportunities to see if they're valuable experiences that that they're committed to, that they like, that they're interested in, that they want to explore further through maybe taking some classes or interning or job shadowing. So there's no magic bullet. It's you just getting provided information is really half of the job. The second half of the job is then what you do with that information, which helps you to kind of narrow down and see what are the best fits for you.
And I think I just want to jump in and say this because I think this is a really important point. Anyone that is supported, all of these assessments are all based off of someone's answers It's the individual's answers. It's not anyone else's input on these assessments. And I'll get to a little bit in a couple of minutes about like what if someone disagrees with them and how that can actually be a positive. But for any parents here, you could do everything right, but your kid is probably going to hedge their answers on these assessments if you're there watching, because now they're going to be answering of what does my parent want me to do? And that's going to muddy the results a little bit. We want these results to be owned by the individual, unbiased.
What do my parents not want me to do?
Exactly, like that. And so we want them to really be coming from internally, so that when the report comes back, if they disagree, you can say, but these were based on your answers, so maybe we need to do them again. So at least when we do assessments, and I know Dan and Beth spoke with us when like we were getting training on going through this, like we have someone sit with them, but only to guide or clarify and slow them down so that they're not rushing through the answers. But that really, really is so important, that these answers need to be meaningful to them, so that the results are meaningful for what they said. It's like they can't blame anyone else of disagreeing with the things because it came from them. So I wanted to just get, so Dan and Beth, so this is a question from the audience. For a student with high functioning autism spectrum disorder, so diagnosis, is it helpful for the provider doing the career assessment to see the most recent neuropsych before starting the career counseling process? And I'll add in just a little bit, and I hope the audience member who asked this, that it doesn't stray too far from the question. Is it helpful versus is it necessary? And I think that will just be, if you could speak to that.
Sure. Yes, it is important when working with individuals to take into account their exceptional strengths and their exceptional deficits. And so what we do in our career counseling is we have them take the assessment that does not ask them questions about their anxiety or depression or any other aspects of their personality. It's just asking about their interests, their abilities, their values, and their personality. It curates a list of 100 jobs, and we also level it such that it matches their desired educational attainment. So if they say, look, I just want to finish high school and I want to go get a job, then we tailor the results so that it doesn't include master's and doctoral level jobs, which are just inappropriate. And likewise, if they say they want a master's and doctorate, we're not going to give them coat checking jobs, even though their profile may match with that as well. So there is a certain amount of educational attainment that's taken into consideration. But then beyond that, we actually know 199 dimensions of every job. We know how strong you have to be, what cognitive capabilities you have to have, what kind of work environment you're going to work in, what people value in that job. And we're able to sort the list based on that. So we call it the Exceptionalities Companion Report. Because we have that information, we can sort the list and take advantage of those things for which the individual is really good at, and we can minimize or try and make those deficits less problematic. So that's how we take into consideration those exceptionalities that you're talking about. But we're interested in both aspects. We're interested in their exceptional strengths, and we want to play to that. And if they have exceptional deficits that are problematic, we address that through a sorting process. And it also gives us insight. We never say that, oh gosh, you have this deficit and this job requires that, you couldn't possibly do that. We would never say that. We're very much believer in Carol Dweck's work, that a growth mindset, that with concentrated effort, we have the ability to learn what it is we need to learn to do the things we want to do. So
in your case, Casey, where we were saying about your shy student, if what he was interested in was something that was very extroverted, but he was like, I can't do that because I'm shy, that job probably would have ended up on the bottom of his list. But then you can say to him, well, if we work on that skill of not being so shy, then you could do this thing that you really want to do.
And I love that empowering aspect of it. It's possible. Now you know what some of the hurdles might be, and we can work on it.
That's it.
And I mean, I always say recent neuropsychs can sometimes bias you as professionals. No matter how good we are, we can be looking for things then. So I think it can help inform the process. But I like how you said, Dan, like get in and do the assessment first. Like you don't need to know the neuropsych background unless there's something glaring. If you're assisting the individual with the actual assessment, like if you know that they have some reading difficulties, that might be something to support them in reading the assessment so it's accurate. So I would almost ask the individual or the family if there's something specific in their neuropsych that you need to know to help them through the process. But I don't see it as necessarily essential. And so I just want to let the audience know, if anyone wants to get in any last questions, we have about 9 minutes left. So I wanted to, just a quick question, and it might not be quick because I'm not a master of career assessments, but Dan and Beth, and I'll get to you after, Sam, don't think I'm neglecting you right now. But how often would you guys recommend, like, I know I sometimes get questions of, I did it 3 years ago, like, do you think I should do it again? Like, how often should these be updated? Like, where does that flexibility of, I did it once, is it really going to change?
No.
If done correctly, that it should provide enough focus, unless the values, the interests, they don't usually radically change over a person's life. And so when you see people coming and doing career switching, it's not normally because they did career counseling and that got them into the field that they want to transition out of. It's usually a case where they backed into a career because, you know, they thought that's what they should do without really taking into consideration.
Like Casey.
Yeah. You know, where it's so we don't see that it's really necessary to update it unless something very different about who they are, because who they are should not necessarily change. And what you're looking for is a field. And so, like, we're in the field of education. We both started out as teachers, then we became administrators. Now we're career consultants or career counselors, but it's not the same job, but it's a field that we've been in, helping people, helping kids,
Working with students,
that has been really our life and passion and purpose. And that can change, but you know, that can be expressed differently throughout the life of our career. But it's not as though we need to go back and take another assessment to find out that our passion is really helping students. We did that way back when, and now we're kind of in that field. So I would say that if done well, they should be in a field where they may make some changes within that field, but they have made some good decisions, or they've made decisions based on good information that should be able to last, and shouldn't radically change.
I think of it sometimes like a compass. It's providing you the general direction, but you're going to figure out the roads you take in that general direction to get to your goal. Or I think about those like peg games where the ball drops down and it like bounces and you eventually get somewhere. That's like you might lean it towards the left, towards education, but that doesn't mean that's where you're going to end up. Like careers are constantly changing and it's the general area. But I do want to just go back and emphasize what Dan said 2 or 3 times in that I think is important. If done well. If a student is young, immature, not taking it seriously and not being honest as they're going through, or they misunderstood it, then yes, it probably should be redone because it's just not done well. It's not accurate. And so I do see that sometimes when individuals disagree with a career assessment, it's well, did you take it seriously? Did you rush through it? Well, yeah, I rushed through it. It was long. Okay, so maybe we should do it again, because if you think all of this isn't real, all the answers came from you. So maybe they weren't right answers. So We got two more questions. Sam, I'm going to throw one over to you quick, and then we'll try to get to that last one as well. So after the actual assessment, you get this report. It comes through however many different batteries of tests they did. Would you review, like, if the students in college, would you review some of the course offerings with that idea of the educational attainment? And would you do that with the student? And I think part of that is just to also just tie in, like Dan and Beth have talked about working backwards into something, but I know when I talk with students, I'm talking about what skills do you want on your resume to get to that job? So, like, how important is it to support students in choosing right classes based off of a report? And should professionals that are supporting them be involved in that process?
Well, remember, it's an exploration process. So I think it's really essential to, figure out how you can use the information through the assessment to explore the different options that the assessment has focused around that might be good options for you. I think it's always good, especially at the college level, to be doing these things with the students, not for the students. By the time they get to college, we really want to develop a much stronger sense of agency and a connection between decision making in their lives. I'm going to do this because of this. And so, yeah, I think it's a very, very good idea to use this information to help explore different options in college, to then evaluate, is this working for me? Is this serving for me? Am I enjoying this? Am I motivated by it? But not doing that for the student or the client, but having them be an active part of that process, going back to executive functioning, teaching them, here's information, now what do I do with it? How do I use it? How does it inform decisions I'm making in the future? And then how do I evaluate whether or not that was a good decision, or if that's a direction I want to go to?
I also think it's important. Very rarely do people teach, like, college freshmen or college sophomores, these are the things that are going to help you get a job. They don't hear that stuff. So, like, when I say to someone, take that Excel course, take it so you can put that on your resume. It's going to actually give you skills. Like, I loved humanities courses. I loved them. I was an Africana studies minor, but it didn't give me, like, a skill that I could put onto my resume. So some guidance from a career counselor of saying, like, I took an applied microeconometrics course that I learned how to use Stata, a statistical analysis tool. I did that just by chance. I was like, I like the professor, so I took the course. But giving guidance to students, like, that looked good on my resume. Maybe not to Sam when I applied to New Frontiers, and she's like, "What's applied microeconometrics?" But these, there are certain things that we can help direct. Of, hey, this class is going to go through a program. I have a student right now who's in an environmental studies major, and he's taken, like, these landscape survey courses using computer programs that look amazing on his resume for the jobs he's applying to. But he needed some direction to know, hey, that's actually why you should be taking courses. Like, what are you actually going to use in your job? So for time's sake, I'm going to just kind of answer these two questions quick. Sorry for stealing the thunder from you guys. So the first one was, you speak of working with students. Do you work with adults post-college, really post-college? Yes. Sure, Dan and Beth do as well. New Frontiers does. Are we going to continually do new career assessments every 3 years for people? No. But there are plenty of people that are in careers for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're miserable. They have never thought about their values being tied in. This would work for them to help them realize, wait, I actually am in the wrong field. So there isn't any real limit. I know, like, I would love the self-reflection of a career assessment. There's not really an end to it. There's so many benefits that come from it. As you get older, like Dan mentioned earlier, like a 60-year-old, it could be beneficial to figure out what they want to do post-retirement, like what could be other jobs they do. And then this other question is about the we always have to have a COVID question, and it's not to shame the question, but it is the times we're in. So how is the online assessment serving this process? It's easy. You share screens, you can go through with them. There's I know the Greenwood assessment, you get a PDF form. You can still get the mailed form that's binded together. So really it's just about using the flexibility of online platforms. But I would say, again, try and do the assessments with the individuals so that the time commitment and the cost that can come from good ones are worth it, so that they are not rushing through it and just trying to get it done. So I know what we do is we share a screen and we make sure that we can see the camera when we're going through together, so that we're doing the assessment together. I don't know if Dan or Beth, if you had something else you wanted to throw in about the virtual aspect of doing them, but.
No, we've always done our career counseling virtually. I mean, we're in Los Angeles, but you know, we career counsel with people around the world. So, and really, the beauty is now, because of COVID, everyone's so much more comfortable, familiar, and ready to Zoom or go to meeting. Whereas when we were doing this 5 years ago, we had to, you know, spend the first 20 minutes of every session on the phone explaining how to download and use the link and so forth. So,
and students and young adults are very used to looking at a screen and focusing what's on that screen. And frequently, if they're in your office, they're looking around at what pictures you have on the wall and what books are on the bookshelf. And so it actually, we find we have their attention really well.
So, okay, so just someone else, a quick question. I don't like missing out people. So how long does the entire process take to do the career evaluation? Everyone's going to be a little bit different. I'll just share my experience with the Greenwood assessment. You complete it, you get like a report emailed to you within like 20 minutes sometimes. Like I haven't seen like a long lag with that. That's the benefit of like an algorithm and things like that. But then going through the process, like that's probably, I don't want to say the least important part. It's where all the information comes from. The assessment, I think, takes around an hour and a half, depending on the speed of comprehension of the individual. But then actually going through it and meaningfully going through it can take time. You don't want to rush that process. It does lead up to like an informational interview, a couple of them at the end. And so setting those up, helping them get on the phone, knowing the questions to ask, that can take time. But that really, it just complements the journey of it. It's not a just in and out process. I did want to loop back and just say one thing about the neuropsych. If someone does have a low IQ, maybe an intellectual disability or things like that, one thing that Dan mentioned earlier is the battery or the listing of jobs that are being filtered through. So that's one thing to consider with the type of assessment you're doing. I know Greenwoods offer a couple of different assessments for different categories of individuals. And so where are you pulling those jobs from? What that list should be might differ based off of IQ level or other factors, just to keep in mind. And so on that, there was one last question. We're not going to be able to get to it right now. But I do want to thank Dan and Beth. You guys, I always put a smile on my face when I get to talk with you, and I'm glad we got a nice long time now. And Sam, thank you as always. Your kids are too young, so we didn't bring them up today. It was the first webinar. They didn't make a star appearance. So
maybe next time.
Or maybe like 10 years. Like 10 years, I think they'll be ready. So all right, guys, thank you so much. And I hope everyone, the spring is coming wherever you are. I'm over at LA, Dan and Beth, I'm sure you're enjoying much better weather than we have been. But everyone enjoy the coming of spring, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having us, Casey. Great seeing you, Samantha. Always a pleasure.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
Always awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.